He believed he was about to publicly execute a young archivist's career. He had no idea he was handing her the very weapon that would settle a 200-year-old debt, a debt his own family had accrued, and one that was about to be paid in blood, ink, and stone. His mistake was simple. He saw her background as a weakness, when in fact it was the entire reason she was there. The air in the Hollowbrook Historical Society's annual gala was so thick with money it was hard to breathe. It smelled of beeswax floor polish, wilting lilies, and the kind of quiet, unassailable entitlement that clung to the velvet drapes like dust. Dr. Imani Vance stood near the back, a still point in a swirling universe of silk and silver hair. She watched the constellations of old families drift through the room, their orbits all centered on one man, a dying star radiating immense gravity. Alistair Sterling. He moved as if he had personally laid the marble floors beneath his handmade Italian shoes, his spine a rigid column of inherited arrogance. His family name wasn't just on a plaque in the lobby, it was woven into the very fabric of the town, a thread of gold that choked out all other colors. When the society's flustered director, Mr. Davies, called her to the small, hastily erected stage, a peculiar hush fell. It wasn't respect. It was the invasive silence of a zoo, of patrons observing a new and unexpected specimen. Dr. Imani Vance. Young, poised, black. In this room, she was a walking, breathing, statistical error. Her simple navy dress was an island of professional calm in a sea of glittering diamonds and judgmental stares. She felt their eyes on her, dissecting her, questioning her presence before she'd even spoken a word. Her presentation began. Her voice, quiet but firm, cut through the oppressive atmosphere. She spoke of her vision, not as an employee but as a historian with a mission. Digitize, democratize, unearth. She spoke of the laborers who built the mills, the immigrants who worked the lines, the free black community whose homesteads were older than the town charter itself. She spoke of history not as a collection of trophies for the wealthy, but as a complex, living ecosystem of stories. She felt the temperature in the room drop with every word. This was not what they paid for. They paid for comfortable myths, for polished statues of their grandfathers. She was offering them dirt and bone. After a smattering of applause so thin it was insulting, a single hand rose. Alistair Sterling didn't wait to be acknowledged. He flowed to the front of the room, parting the crowd like a shark's fin through water. Dr. Vance. His voice was smooth, a river stone polished by generations of condescension. A fascinating, if somewhat, revisionist perspective. He stopped a few feet from the stage, forcing her to look down on him. A subtle power play she recognized instantly. He was making her the aggressor. You speak of these forgotten narratives, but one must question the qualifications of the narrator. The room went dead silent. This was the main event. With all due respect, he purred, the words a transparent veil for the poison they carried, what can someone of your particular background truly comprehend about the intricate, deep-rooted lineage of Hollowbrook's founding families? Families like my own? The insult landed, a physical blow in the silent room. He wasn't just attacking her credentials, her Ph.D. from Yale, her fellowship at the Smithsonian, details Mr. Davies had nervously stammered through. He was attacking her blood, her skin, her fundamental right to interpret the sacred texts of his tribe. He expected her to crumble, to stammer an apology, to shrink under the collective weight of their disdain. Imani Vance did none of those things. Her heart was a cold, steady drum against her ribs. She looked down at him, this monument of a man, and felt a profound, almost chilling calm settle over her. A tiny smile, sharp as a needle, touched her lips but died before it could reach her eyes. "That's an interesting question, Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice did not tremble. It was as clear and cold as the winter air outside. It presupposes that history is a matter of heritage rather than a discipline of evidence. The gauntlet was down. The air in the room crackled. Alistair Sterling's silver eyebrows shot up. He was a man who had not been contradicted by an employee in his entire adult life. He had expected a nervous defense, a flurry of credentials. He had not anticipated a direct challenge to his entire world view. "Discipline," he scoffed, the sound echoing slightly in the tense quiet. He took a half-step closer, his face hardening. "I'm not talking about a university course. I'm talking about lived heritage, bloodlines, the soul of this town. Things that cannot possibly be learned from a dusty book by someone who shares no connection to the subject." The veil was gone. The prejudice was naked, strutting across the floor for all to see. Imani's calm was no longer passive. It was a weapon. It was a mirror she was holding up to his raw, sputtering ego. "On the contrary, Mr. Sterling," she said, her tone still perfectly level. "A personal connection can create blind spots. It can mistake family lore for historical fact. My training teaches me to see the entire landscape, not just the manicured gardens of a single estate. My discipline is about primary sources. It's about cross-referencing land deeds with tax ledgers, verifying claims with court dockets. It is about finding the truth, whether or not that truth is comfortable." Each word was a precise, surgical incision. She was dismantling his argument piece by piece, exposing it as nothing more than entitled sentiment. He was losing control, and he knew it. He could feel the eyes of his peers on him, seeing the exchange not as a titan correcting an upstart, but as a bully being calmly outmaneuvered. "Family lore?" he boomed, his voice finally rising, a crack in the smooth facade. "The Sterling family's contributions to this town are a matter of unimpeachable historical record." "I'm sure they are," Imani replied, her voice dropping into a softer, more dangerous register. "And the purpose of a professional archivist is to ensure that record is complete, accurate, for everyone." The tension was now a physical thing, a pressure in the ears. Mr. Davies looked like he was seconds away from a heart attack, his hands fluttering at his sides like wounded birds. He was watching his biggest donor being humiliated, his new hire refusing to bend. Sterling, blinded by rage and a lifetime of being told he was right, decided to end it. He would set a trap so perfect, so final, she would have no choice but to resign in disgrace. "Very well, Doctor," he said, spitting the title like it was a foul taste in his mouth. "Let's have a demonstration of this discipline of yours." He spread his hands, a gesture of magnanimous, false generosity. "I will personally grant you full, unrestricted access to the Sterling family's private collection. It is housed in the Society's main vault. Some of it hasn't been seen by outside eyes in over a century." He smiled, a cold, triumphant twist of his lips. "Consider it a test. Dig into my family's history. My ancestor, Theodore Sterling's life. Show us all what you can find. I am quite confident you'll discover nothing but a legacy of unimpeachable integrity, civic leadership, and business acumen." It was a checkmate, a masterful move. If she found nothing, she was incompetent, her discipline a hollow boast. If she found some trivial discrepancy, he could dismiss it as academic nitpicking. He had locked her in a cage of his own design. The sense of victory washed over him, almost making him giddy. Imani's serene expression didn't flicker, But now, for the first time, a genuine smile reached her eyes. It was not a happy smile. It was a smile of profound, chilling recognition. It sent a tremor of unease through Sterling's triumph. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk willingly into a snare. The name. Theodore Sterling. It wasn't just a name from the town's founding. It was a name that had been whispered in her own family for generations. A ghost story. A cautionary tale about a theft so old it had become myth. And this man, this arrogant fool, had just handed her the keys to the crime scene. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice imbued with a new weight, a new purpose. "I accept your generous offer. I will give the Sterling family archives the same rigorous, impartial attention I give to all historical subjects." She paused, holding his gaze. "I look forward to presenting my findings. To you. And to the board." The way she said it felt less like an acceptance, and more like a pronouncement of sentence. For the next 3 weeks, Dr. Imani Vance became a ghost within the Historical Society. The staff whispered as she passed, a silent figure moving between her small office and the heavy steel door of the climate-controlled vault. The vault was her world now. A cold, silent tomb filled with the carefully curated life of Alistair Sterling's ancestors. She worked with a focus that was less academic and more obsessive. It unnerved everyone. She didn't just look at the leather-bound journals of Theodore Sterling, filled with his self-aggrandizing prose about building a town from wilderness. She felt the lie in them. She spent the first week constructing the official narrative, the one Sterling believed to be ironclad: the arrival in Hollowbrook in 1835, the purchase of a small plot of land, the founding of the first lumber mill. It was all there, meticulously documented, too meticulous. It was a story polished until it gleamed, with no rough edges, no dirt under its fingernails. History was never that clean. Alistair Sterling, meanwhile, was growing restless. He had expected a quick, cursory review, followed by a fawning report and a quiet resignation. This silence, this monastic dedication, was not part of his plan. It felt accusatory. He called Mr. Davies twice a day. "What is she doing in there? Has she found anything? Why is it taking so long?" Davies, sweating through his shirts, could only stammer, "She's just working, Alistair. She's being very thorough." Inside the vault, surrounded by the ghosts of his family, Imani was being more than thorough. She was hunting. The cold air smelled of decaying paper and secrets. Her fingers, numb from the chill, turned the brittle pages of ledgers and deeds. By day 2 of the second week, she found the first crack. It wasn't in the Sterling collection itself. It was in the municipal archives she had requested, to the confusion of the county clerk. An old hand-drawn surveyor's map of the valley, dated 1837. Her breath caught in her chest. There it was. A sprawling 200-acre plot of prime riverfront land, the best parcel in the entire valley, with the deep water access essential for any future mill. But the name inked on the property line wasn't Sterling. It was C. Vance, Cyrus Vance, the name from her family's stories. The great-great-great-grandfather who had owned paradise and lost it. It was real. He was real. She traced the faded letters with a trembling finger. C. Vance. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This map shouldn't exist. According to the Sterling family records, Theodore had purchased that land in 1838, a year later, directly from the county. The official story was that it had been abandoned, seized for unpaid taxes. A savvy business deal, as Sterling would call it. A lie. Her blood was singing with it. A lie 2 centuries old. She spent the next few days pulling on that single thread, and the entire tapestry of the Sterling legacy began to unravel in her hands. She requested the county tax ledgers for 1837. The clerk grumbled, having to retrieve the enormous dust-caked volume from deep storage. Imani carried it back to her office like a sacred text. She opened it, the spine cracking in protest. And there, under the entry for Parcel 7B, the riverfront land, was a crisp, clear notation in elegant cursive. Taxes for the year 1837. Paid in full. Cyrus Vance. Paid in full. She had to stand up, walk to the window, and take a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. He hadn't been delinquent. The land had been stolen. But how? She needed proof. She worked through the night, fueled by black coffee and a righteous fury that burned away all exhaustion. She requested the court dockets for Hollowbrook County, winter term 1838. There it was. A petition filed in January of 1838. Not a tax seizure filing. Something worse. A petition filed by 3 men. Men whose names she recognized as business associates of Theodore Sterling from his journals, claiming that the landowner, Mr. Cyrus Vance, a free black man, and, according to census records she'd already pulled, a literate farmer, was of unsound mind and incapable of managing his own affairs. They claimed he was a danger to himself and the community. The petition was granted by a Judge Miller. The land was stripped from Cyrus and put under the county's control, which then sold it, for a pittance, to the only bidder. A man who had just opened a new mill and needed river access. Theodore Sterling. It was almost perfect. A legal, bloodless crime. But her training screamed at her to check every angle. She dug into the judge, and that's when she found the final nail for the coffin. A private loan ledger, misfiled in a box of municipal receipts. A very generous, interest-free loan, granted to Judge Miller in the first week of February, 1838. The lender, Theodore Sterling. She leaned back in her chair, the silence of the archives pressing in on her. She had it. A fraudulent competency hearing, backed by cronies, ruled on by a bought and paid-for judge, all to steal the most valuable piece of land in the valley from a free black farmer. From her ancestor. That night, she didn't work. She went home to her small apartment and called her father. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Dad, I found him. I found Cyrus, and I found out what they did." The next morning, she sent a single, formal email to the board of the Hollowbrook Historical Society and to Mr. Alistair Sterling. The subject line was simple. Presentation of preliminary findings, the Sterling family collection. The day had come. She was no longer just an archivist. She was a witness for the dead. The boardroom was a weapon designed to intimidate. The mahogany walls absorbed the light. The long, polished table reflected the stern, judgmental faces of the portraits that lined the room. Generations of pale, grim-faced men, former society presidents, stared down, a silent jury of the long-dead elite. Alistair Sterling sat at the head of the table, the living embodiment of all that power. He was flanked by the nervous board members, a collection of men and women who owed their positions, in one way or another, to his family's influence. He looked comfortable, secure, a king in his throne room, ready to pass sentence. Dr. Imani Vance entered, and the quiet shuffling of papers ceased. She carried a laptop and a small projector. Her movements were deliberate, economical. She didn't look like an employee about to be fired. She looked like a prosecutor about to deliver her opening statement. Her composure was a suit of armor. Inside, her pulse was a frantic drum, but her hands were steady as she plugged in the projector. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling, members of the board," she began, her voice calm and even, filling the oppressive silence. As requested, I have conducted a thorough archival review of the Sterling family collection, cross-referenced with relevant state and municipal records. Alistair Sterling gave a small, condescending nod. He steepled his fingers, leaned back in his chair, and prepared to be bored, then vindicated. Imani began her presentation. For the first 10 minutes, she did exactly what he expected. She detailed the well-known, accepted narrative of the Sterling family's rise, their arrival, their ingenuity, the founding of the first mill, their civic contributions. She praised the meticulous nature of their record-keeping, the detailed journals of Theodore Sterling. She saw a smug, self-satisfied smile flicker across Alistair's lips. He thought she was laying the groundwork for her own surrender, admitting that his family's history was exactly as unimpeachable as he'd claimed. He was relaxing. He was being lulled. The official narrative, as preserved in the family's private collection, is quite robust, Imani continued, her tone shifting almost imperceptibly. It hardened, losing its academic deference and gaining a sharp forensic edge. However, a historian's job is not simply to repeat a story, it's to interrogate the silences in the record, to ask why certain documents exist and others don't. And I found a significant silence followed by a flurry of very curious activity in the winter of 1838. She clicked a button on her laptop. The projector whirred to life, throwing a bright image onto the screen behind her. It was the digitized copy of the hand-drawn county map from 1837. A large, 200-acre plot of prime riverfront land was clearly outlined, the name next to it stark and clear. C. Vance. This map, dated 1837, shows that the single most valuable parcel of land in this valley, the plot with the river access crucial for any mill, was owned by a man named Cyrus Vance. Alistair Sterling shifted in his massive chair. His smile vanished. A historical footnote. My ancestor, Theodore, acquired that land legally from the county the following year when it fell into delinquency, a savvy business deal. His voice was dismissive, but a flicker of irritation crossed his face. That would be true, Imani said, her eyes locking onto his. For the first time, she let him see the steel beneath her composure. If the owner had actually been delinquent. Click. The next slide appeared. It was a high-resolution image of the 1837 county tax ledger. She used her laser pointer to highlight a single, crisp entry. The ink was faded, but the script was undeniable. Cyrus Vance, paid in full. The silence in the room changed. It was no longer expectant. It was heavy, suffocating. One of the board members cleared his throat nervously. But the official court filing that authorized the county to seize the land, Imani went on, her voice dropping slightly, becoming a narrative of relentless, damning facts, claimed the taxes were unpaid. More than that, the seizure wasn't based on a tax claim at all. It was based on a petition. Click. The next slide. A scan of the petition to the court. A petition filed by 3 of Theodore Sterling's known business associates, claiming the owner, Cyrus Vance, a free black man and a literate farmer, was, quote, of unsound mind and incapable of managing his own affairs. Alistair Sterling's face had gone pale, the color of old parchment. He started to speak, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. The petition was granted by a Judge Miller. Imani continued, her voice a merciless cadence of facts. The land was taken from Cyrus Vance and sold by the county to your ancestor Theodore Sterling, for pennies on the dollar. She paused, letting the horror of it sink in. And my research shows that Judge Miller received a very generous, interest-free loan from Theodore Sterling 1 week after he signed the order. This is slander, Alistair finally choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. He looked around the table for support, but the other board members were staring at the screen, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. A ridiculous, baseless accusation, woven from century-old clerical errors. "Is it, Mr. Sterling?" Imani asked softly. She clicked to her final, devastating slide. On one side of the screen was the 1838 property deed, the official document transferring the seized land to Theodore Sterling, and right next to it she displayed another document, a high-resolution scan of a page from a worn, leather-bound book. It was an entry from a family Bible, the names and dates recorded in careful, flowing script that had been passed down for 7 generations. Her family's Bible. The entry noted the birth of a son, Elias Vance, to his father, Cyrus Vance, in 1840. Imani turned off the projector. The screen went blank, plunging the room back into its mahogany gloom. She stood in the dim light and faced the stunned board. She looked directly at the man at the head of the table, the Titan of Hollowbrook, who now looked small, shrunken, a fraud exposed by the very history he claimed as his own. Her composure finally broke, not into anger, but into a wave of profound, righteous certainty that had been building for 200 years. "Cyrus Vance was my great-great-great-grandfather," she stated, her voice resonating with the weight of generations of stolen legacy. "Your family's fortune, Mr. Sterling, your name. The very foundation of the power you used to question my right to stand in this room was built upon a crime. It was built on a lie. It was stolen from my family. The power in the room didn't just reverse. It shattered into a million pieces. Alistair Sterling, the man whose name was etched in stone all over town, was nothing more than the descendant of a thief. The bloodline he prized so highly was contaminated." He stared at her, his mouth slightly agape, his face a mask of utter ruin. Imani let the silence stretch, letting him drown in it. "You asked what someone with my background could possibly understand about your history," she said, her voice now quiet, but carrying more power than all of his blustering ever had. "It seems I understand it more intimately than you ever did. History isn't a monument to be polished, Mr. Sterling. It is a living account of humanity, its triumphs and its crimes. My job isn't to protect the powerful from uncomfortable truths. My job is to restore the full story, especially for those who had their voices and their land stolen from them." She slid a thick folder across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of the trembling Mr. Davies. "This is a proposal for a new, permanent initiative. I'm calling it the Hollowbrook Restorative History Project. Its mission will be to actively research and amplify the stories of the marginalized communities whose contributions to this valley have been systematically erased. It will be funded, initially, by a complete historical and financial audit of the foundational assets of the Sterling family endowment, with the goal of establishing a foundation for the descendants of the families they and others displaced. This will be our first case study." The board stared at the folder, then at the broken man at the head of the table. They saw the public relations nightmare, the legal catastrophe. But they also saw a path forward, a way out of being a dusty relic of a shameful past and into becoming a relevant, vital institution. Mr. Davies, finding his spine for the first time, cleared his throat. I second the proposal." One by one, the other board members nodded their assent. Alistair Sterling said nothing. He didn't move. He was no longer a benefactor or a patriarch. He was an artifact, a relic of a lie, stripped bare by the quiet, unyielding power of the truth. Weeks later, Dr. Imani Vance stood in the main hall of the society. The air felt different, lighter, cleaner. Workers were carefully installing a new exhibit in the place of honor. In the center, under a soft, warm light, was a newly framed, restored portrait of a handsome, proud-looking black man from the 1840s, his gaze clear and intelligent. Imani watched them hang the brass plaque beneath it. It read, "Cyrus Vance, farmer, landowner, and a founding father of Hollowbrook." History was not a closed book. It was a conversation, and for the first time in 200 years, the right people were finally speaking.